Hello. I want to discuss the phenomenon called MGTOW. There's a lot of misinformation out there about this concept, so I want to set the record straight as I see it. MGTOW is an acronym which stands for Men Going Their Own Way. I gave a quick description of this concept in my response to a racist white knight video, but I'll be expanding on it here. This discussion will be a three-part series. I hope someone finds it interesting and informative. So, you may be reading through the interwebs, surfing and whatnot. All of a sudden, you, a standard hetero, homo, transo, pinto, whatever O, sexual, you, someone who is cool with your world, your family, and your role in society, you stumble upon an article in Vice. You see a headline which reads, "This group of straight men is swearing off women." Like I said, you are a hetero, homo, whatever, sexual, you are fine with yourself in society, you've never been disenfranchised by the opposite sex, and don't know what the big deal is here. So you read through the Vice article, link in the description. It reads, "All over the world, straight men are making the conscious decision not to be involved with women. It's more of an ideological celibacy, one that crosses both national borders and religious divides. And the basic reason is the slow crawl toward gender equality." You may think, why would a straight guy decide to separate from women altogether? And how could anyone have a problem with gender equality? That makes no sense. What's this about, you ask? Reading on, they, MGTOW, have a serious problem with feminism. To them, the feminist movement has all but ruined our society. And it just doesn't make sense to participate in the dating game because women have been, in their eyes, programmed to ruin a man's life. Around every corner they seem to see a one-dimensional woman who are just out to take their well-earned money and stick them with kids who aren't theirs. You think, well, that's just paranoid. I heard women are always getting shafted and screwed by the rape culture and the wage gap. What are these men complaining about? I mean, they're the privileged class. At least that's what I always hear about. Reading on, they've had enough, and they're taking their balls and going home. Also, one can't simply proclaim to be a MGTOW. There are stages. In fact, numerous MGTOWs have proposed that members of the community can track their growth with something called the 4 levels of MGTOW. Recognition, long-term relationships out, short-term relationships out, stop earning money, and finally goes full-on Tyler Durden, complete with shitty abandoned house squatting. That last bit was paraphrased because the description of the 4 levels of MGTOW is quite long. Suddenly, you now have a picture of crazy people, maybe even schizo, locked in an insane asylum, having full-on discussions with their invisible best friends, shitting on the ground to look for hidden alien anal probes, and finding invisible gold nuggets between their toes. You think, geez, what a bunch of morons. You may even think, sounds like, as one guy put it, these MGTOW are just a bunch of children, just like feminists, wanting to run around naked in the streets, forget their responsibilities, and not have anyone tell them what to do. You get the idea and flip off the article and continue surfing the web. Now, do you know MGTOW from reading this article? Of course not. This is a woman describing in sarcastic fashion a philosophy which defines women as less than perfect. You think just maybe she might have a little bias in writing this article? Of course she will not give an accurate picture of MGTOW. In the interest of full disclosure, I am not MGTOW. I cannot in good conscience bear the title. I wish I could. I am, as it has been suggested, awakened while married. I cannot complain about my wife, like others might. She's no spendthrift, she doesn't cheat, she doesn't try to restrict me from personal pursuits, and so I cannot claim the same level of persecution other men have. She doesn't commit the female cardinal sins. And I am in the same category. I don't hit her, cheat on her, chain her to the vacuum cleaner, force her to work on 5th and Main at night on weekends. She has a full-time job. We have a daughter. I cannot claim to be a real victim of feminine hierarchy. But here's the thing. I recognize it is a thing, this feminine hierarchy. So many people disregard the problem simply because they aren't a victim of the problem yet. But imagine, you have a girlfriend. She calls the cops and claims that you raped her. In fact, you had just had sex. Your cum is in there. And she used some object to roughen her vagina. So there's no question from a medical standpoint. You raped her. You get 3 years in prison. Don't you think you'd be pissed off about that? You might even be jaded for life. Oh, horrors! You might actually distrust women in general. You might think all women are just as dishonest as your girlfriend was. Perish the thought. Oh, the humanity. Newsflash. Some men have a damn good reason for being unfair to all women. And this is not a fantasy football play here. This stuff happens all the time. Men are accused by these poor, helpless women and lose their houses, jobs, children, money, property, and even their future wages. This is not a small thing. A man is his independence. A man is his livelihood. Becoming a wage slave is the worst possible fate for a man. This kind of theft is a huge deal. But society hears, man accused of rape loses job. We've been conditioned to hear the words rape and man in the same sentence and get angry at that man without a second thought. We hear of a woman who kills her children. We don't imagine ourselves choking her unconscious, beating her face in until she needs dental records for identification, and then cutting off her hands and feet just for spite. We might be glad she's in prison while we're left sad and confused. But isn't it easier to imagine doing this bloody act to a man who killed his own children? Men are okay to abuse. We feel no protection instinct for an abused male. We always feel a protection instinct for an abused woman. The fascinating thing, though, women used to be restricted from work, voting, education, what have you, under the guise of protection. Just as we have child labor laws to protect child exploitation or injury. A woman should not work outside the home, so the common thought went. She had a protected place. She shouldn't have to break her back. That's the man's job. Women were taken care of by being restricted from working, at least in ancient cultures. No, I'm not suggesting it was a good thing that women were restricted from working, or whatever it was. I'm pointing out that the restriction from work in many cases wasn't an evil plot to put women in a box, but rather to protect women from the hard life in the factory or long days at the plow. Men were to provide, and women were to reap the benefits. This idea puts the feminist rhetoric of keeping the girl down in a whole new light, doesn't it? But along came first wave feminism, the suffragettes, divorce laws, alimony, etc. Now, discrimination is illegal in every area of American society. Hooray! Now we can stop bitching about unfairness. But no, feminism didn't do its work and retire once the goal was accomplished. Feminism is a solution looking for a problem. There is no wage gap. There is no rape culture. There is no institutional bias or misogyny against women. Period. In fact, there is male discrimination codified into policy. It might not sound like it, but hiring practices in many boardrooms, STEM fields, and various industries are trying to get on the feminist good side. So they have female quotas. X number of women are given preference over male candidates. That is literally institutional bias against men. The institutional bias against women, which feminists just love to complain about, is not on paper. It's not sanctioned policy. It's an accusation without evidence to back it up. Or, like the wage gap, it's an accusation with dishonest evidence to back it up. The feminist claims of disenfranchisement are nothing but an empty claim riding on the shoulders of entrenched misinformation and historical precedent. But the institutional bias against men is actually written down as a policy and enforced as a policy in many institutions and government human resource offices. But see, men don't complain. And even when they do, such as MRAs, nobody takes them seriously. Think about it. What happened when the GOP candidates complained about the MSNBC debate moderators? Obama comes out, Mr. Feminist, hashtag gay rights, Mr. Help the Little Guy himself, and says, well, if they can't even handle a bunch of debate moderators, how will they handle Putin or China? Ha ha ha, silly complaining men. That's what happens when men complain. When women complain, the manager does as they're told. Women's claims of discrimination are always considered sympathetically, if not automatically responded to in a meaningful way. For example, some female employee goes to the manager. Hello, sir. Fuck Guilt just sexually harassed me. Oh my god, really? What happened? Well, sir, he made a very inappropriate joke, and then he looked at my breasts. I felt very scared, and I just don't think I can stand to work with him. I'm so afraid every time I walk by his desk. She pauses to shed a tear. The manager looks incredulous, angry even. Well, I'll handle it. Don't you worry, he says, putting a comforting hand on her shoulder. The next day, I get a letter in my office mailbox. It's pink. This is just an example, but it happens all the time. Men are paralyzed. How do we defend against such accusations? Oftentimes, a business will have a no-tolerance policy, meaning that the man will be fired automatically regardless of the claim, or a manager will just find it easier and more acceptable to fire the accused man rather than look like he doesn't believe the woman and risk being accused of misogyny himself. We are men. We are guilty until the accuser is proven guilty of lying. Men are labeled the aggressor. We've all heard of the Duke lacrosse case and the Rolling Stone article about the UVA fraternity. Both times, the women had to be proven to be liars. But those are high-profile cases. I posted 2 examples of MGTOW who lost their jobs because of female accusations in the description. It really does happen all the time. We just rarely hear about it. As I said, men are assumed to be guilty until proven innocent. I'm an RN, a registered nurse. It happened to me. Now, I wasn't fired, but I was targeted by female coworkers and had multiple discussions in my manager's office. What could I say? I couldn't fight any kind of accusation as the accusers were assumed to be correct. It was up to me to prove my innocence. But how can a man prove an anecdotal accusation based on nothing but hearsay? As such, men are helpless in the face of most female accusations of all kinds of misdeeds, whatever they may be. It is so easy for a woman to make a false accusation, since there's no consequences for doing so. In Mangum versus Duke lacrosse, Mangum wasn't sent to prison for the same sentence the lacrosse players would have gotten. She wasn't ordered to walk around her town for a year wearing a sign describing her lies on the front with a sincere apology on the back. She wasn't ordered to spend 6 months in a psych ward for her obvious sociopathic tendencies. No. The Duke lacrosse players were exonerated and had to spend a year during the trial as the face of the American rape culture so many feminists are desperate for. In fact, she, Mangum, did no jail time until finally stabbing her boyfriend to death. She got 14 years. She killed her boyfriend, okay? Now, she claimed he was trying to kill her by choking her. Poor woman. She clearly had to defend herself. Hearing her claims of self-defense, don't we all automatically, before our senses kick back in and we can think rationally, don't we all automatically want to be on her side? Can you feel your knee jerk to come to her aid and hate her boyfriend? Maybe we're automatically relieved she was able to save herself from her attacker. But wait, an established liar is claiming self-defense after stabbing a man to death. The same woman who almost got an entire lacrosse team imprisoned for no reason whatsoever. Feminists have done their dirty work, and they've done it well. Men are the automatic face of evil until proven innocent in the court of public opinion. This is why MGTOW exists, and will always exist. If a feminist or white knight describes MGTOW as some group of pissed off little boys with no sense of responsibility, realize where they're coming from. Feminists are the opposition. To accept their opinion of MGTOW is the same as accepting claims that the Holocaust never happened from a racist white supremacist. Of course he thinks this. A feminist isn't going to display MGTOW in a reasonable light because she or he is the opposition. I will continue this discussion in the next video. Thanks for listening.